Morning everybody, welcome to another day with us on the farm here at JSH Rabbits. Today we have another wonderful video for you, very informative. What's the topic? This is a topic that you may have all been waiting for. Today we're going to talk about cage building, so stay tuned. Before you can make any cages, you definitely need to have wire. Currently, we're using the 14 gauge 1x1 and the 17 gauge half by 1. Normally, we'd be using the 14 gauge 1x1 and the 14 gauge half by 1. But, we are not able to get the 14 gauge in this one right now. So, if you've been following the channel, you would have seen the video where we spoke about where we source wire from. So you can look at that one. I'll leave the link in the description, or I'll put the link in the box at the top there. So you would have seen that. But currently, based on the fact that we can't get any 14 gauge half by 1, we're using the 17 gauge because it can still work. So here we are at the table, and right now we're gonna talk about some of the tools that we need in our cage building. These are the tools that we'll need to build our cages. So we have regular J-clip pliers, we have heavy duty J-clip pliers, and we have a J-clip remover. Alright, we also have J-clips, but these J-clips are the stainless steel J-clips, and we found that using regular galvanized J-clips with 14 gauge wire doesn't really work out so well, because eventually they will start to unroll, they pull out. So with stainless steel J-clips though, you definitely need heavy duty J-clip pliers, because trust me, to clip them with these is very, very difficult. Alright, so in terms of putting the cage together, this is most of what you would need. Another thing that you'll need is called hog rings or C-rings, and you'll need the hog ring pliers or C-ring pliers to apply those. Now, these sort of clamp a little bit differently than J-clips, so there are some applications that J-clips cannot be used for, and when you encounter those situations, then these can come in pretty handy. You also need some kind of cutting implement. So these are 8-inch bolt cutters, and you definitely need these to cut wire that is like 14 gauge thereabout. You can use this to cut like the 17 gauge and so forth, but it's extremely difficult to use this and cut 14 gauge wire, so we use this instead. You'll need a hammer, and you'll also need some regular pliers. This one is not in the best condition right now, but it's helpful to have on hand when we are doing cage building. So these are most of the tools that you'll need. What will come in handy when your cage building is using a brake, and a brake is a machine that is used to bend things or to bend the wire. We don't have a brake right now, so How we get around that is we use a piece of wood, lay it on the ground, or lay the wire on the ground and use the piece of wood to help us to bend the wire. So that's it in terms of what you would need. And of course, later on in the video, you'll actually see us making cages. So stay tuned for that. How could I forget this? In your cage building, you'll definitely need a tape measure. And of course, you'll see us using it in the video going forward. But you'll also see us counting squares. So because the wire is 1 by 1 or half by 1, we can also count squares to get an idea of where we need to cut the wire. So you will see us using the tape measure and also counting squares. The question may be asked, where can we access some of these things? The truth is, you don't have many options. We've had to import most of the supplies that we use for building cages. So the J-clip pliers and the J-clips and so forth, we've had to import those. Normally, we get our supplies from a company called Clubbertons in the US. There's also another company, Bass Equipment, that sells these things. So we'll leave the link to those places in the description below. And of course, you have the good old eBay and Amazon that you can access some of these things as well. So if you're good with online shopping, then you can access those things there. Locally speaking, I've not seen these things being sold at many other places. As a matter of fact, the only place I've seen them is Hyper Ace in Central Village, St. Catherine. So I've seen J-clips and J-clip pliers there before, but I haven't seen them there in a while, so I'm not sure if they still stock those items. So we've taken the easy route, which was the import, and we're happy with that so far. In terms of the other stuff though, the regular pliers and the cutting implements and stuff, those can be sourced locally at your local hardware, so those shouldn't be very hard to come by. Now, when you're making cages, there are many cage designs that you can actually utilize. In our case, we are not necessarily sticking to the traditional cage size. Our operation is more geared to an industrial or commercial type operation, so our cage sizes are not necessarily standard. However, a good cage size to start with could be something like a 24 by 30, a 2 feet by 2.5, and that would be for a door cage. A good size buck cage could be a 24 by 24, but as I said earlier, our operation is geared more to commercial purposes, so our cage sizes are a little bit smaller. Today we're gonna be making some more of these cages, so we're in the process of cutting them out now. So the intention is to actually build about 2 more stands and then fill out this entire space with cages. This top one, for example, it's rectangular, so the floor is 20 by 24 and the height is 16. So it's 20 by 24 by 16 and it's rectangular. Now the entire length of a row, which consists of 4 cages, is 8 feet. When you have all the tools and the wire on hand, the first thing you'll need to do is you will need to cut out your cages. You need to be aware of your dimensions, and from there you will mark the wire and cut the relevant lengths that you need. So what we're doing now is basically measuring out and cutting what will become the bottom of each cage or set of cages. So we are actually cutting the 1/2 wire right now, the 17 gauge. A good idea to avoid things like these is to actually wear pants. Wire is very sharp. Wire is very sharp, and when you cut it, it leaves a lot of sharp edges. So a good idea is to wear pants and of course gloves, long sleeve shirts to sort of protect yourself from scratches and scrapes. Right now we're going to mark out and cut some pieces of the 1/1. So we're just rolling it out a little bit to get the length of what we want, so we can cut out the requisite parts.
So in order to avoid doing a lot of cutting, what we're basically going to do is we're going to draw it out so that we can actually fold the material rather than cutting it. So we know that it's going to be 16 high, 24 wide, and 20 deep. So we're going to look into marking out all of that on this and try to avoid cutting. So firstly, I count from here to here for 16, and then from here to here, which is 20 deep. So 16 high, 20 deep, and then I'm going to count the wide, which is going to be 24.
Alright, so he is going to do that for all of the cages. So he's going to count them off and mark. You know, we have a lot of wire around the place, so we're going to show you the different parts that we've cut out once we are complete. So when you're cutting large pieces of wire, sometimes you have to bend the wire a particular way. You might have to set it a particular way so you can cut it, you know, sometimes like this and other ways too. Both of us are here now and we're cutting out different parts of the cages. Of course, when we finish doing this, assembly comes next.
Yep.
So we basically cut out all that we need to cut out. So we're now going to do some assembly, and basically we are going to assemble one of these rectangular cages similar to what is on top here. Alright, so I'm just going to show you the parts that we are going to use to assemble the cages. So take a look. These are the parts that we're going to use. So what Samuel is marking now is the bottom of the cage. As you can see, it is the 1/2 17 gauge. Ideally we would be using 14 gauge, but we're using what is available, and the width of it, or the dimensions of it, is basically 20 by 96. Yes, to cover the entire bottom of the cage. But what we did is actually 23 or 24 by 96, so it will have some overlap. Right, this section right here actually forms 3 pieces, so it will be folded to form the top, which is over on this side, the back, and the 2 end partitions. So where you see that long line in the middle, that's where it will be folded to form the back and the top, and then right there it will be folded to form one of the end partitions. So it's easier or quicker to fold as opposed to cutting. Yes, so it's easier to do and it adds to the strength of your cages, so it cuts down the time that you will have to make the cages, makes them very quick to make. So if you can avoid cutting, you should do so. All right, so these are the additional partitions that will be necessary. Based on the length of the cage that we're building, we will have actually 4 cages in one row. So the 2 end partitions are attached to the top and the back, and then we'll need 3 additional partitions to put in the middle. And these partitions now are 20 by 16 inches, of course. So we're moving on from those now to the front piece. So this piece here will form the front piece, and as you can see, the spaces for the door and the feeders are cut out, and you will see space for 4 doors. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 4 feeder spaces. So these are all the parts necessary to assemble the cage. We would have shown the tools that we used before, including the J-clips and the C-rings and all of that. For this rectangular cage, we're going to be using mostly J-clips. Alright, so we're going to assemble it so you can see. This wire in particular is the 17 gauge, so it can be folded by hand. So we're going to fold it at the requisite parts. Remember, we said that it will have an overlap. Yes, this is the bottom of the cage, so we're folding it at the right place so it has the overlap. We don't have a brake to use, so in that case we have to improvise. So we're improvising to get the folds that we need. We're ready to fold the top part. So as I said, we don't have a brake, so we have to use what we have and be resourceful in order to fold the wire at the requisite sections. Alright, so Samuel just folded one of the ends. We're going to fold the other end down here. Then we're gonna fold the middle section now to give us the back of the cage. Now we are going to put in the middle partitions, and Samuel is using the J-clips to make that addition, and with these they are relatively easy to do. We don't have to do a lot of maneuvering, but there will come a time in the process where we will need to use the light duty J-clip pliers to catch in some hard to reach places. As you can see, the cage is being formed slowly. And what we are doing too is we are putting on an additional layer of protection by overlaying the 1x1 with some 1/2x1 as a baby saving measure. Sometimes what will happen is that the rabbits will be bred and we don't know, and sometimes they'll have kits in the cage and they can actually crawl through the 1x1 wire and get hurt. It doesn't really take very long to put this together. I think what takes the longest is actually cutting the wire and making the preparations to have everything together. I think that's what takes the longest. Mind you, this is not easy work, but because we're professionals, yeah, because we're professionals, we make it look easy, right, Samuel?
Most definitely.
Yeah. We've put in all of the middle partitions, so now we're gonna put on the front piece. Now we're going to attach it with the J-clips, but what we'll need to do is we'll need to start at one end to attach it, because the wire is 1x1, but a lot of times it's slightly longer or wider than 1x1, so we have to start from one end to make sure that we get it right. Of course, the doors will need to go in as well, but we can save those for later. Right now we've partially attached the front. I don't know if you can see it, but it's partially attached. So what we're going to do is we're going to put on the bottom piece and then we fully attach the front. As I said before, this wire can be a bit of a challenge to work with, because even though it's a 1x1 or a 1x1/2, it's not exactly 1 or exactly 1x1/2. So it has a little plus or minus. So we're gonna put on the bottom piece now, and then we completely clip up everything. So sometimes we'll have to use the light duty J-clip pliers because of the tight spaces, the tight tolerances, to catch the thing first, and then we clip it up with the heavy duty J-clips pliers, the heavy duty pliers. Now we've put on the bottom of one set of cages, and now we'll move to basically tightening up the top. Once we do that, we would have basically completed building the cage, except for putting on the doors. So this is it. Bottom has been put on, and then we're just gonna tighten up. One set of cages completed, and they are basically 20 by 96. That's the full length of the group, and each cage is 20 by 24 by 16. All right, so that's it. Gonna build a couple more, and then we will put them on the stand. So as you can see, it's light enough for one person to lift. Samuel is a strong dude. Yeah, but we're going to assemble a couple more. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be assembling some of the slanted cages. They are basically the same, as the rectangular cage in terms of most of the measurements. The only thing different would be the sides, the sides and the partition, the middle partitions, so they are slanted in turn instead of rectangular. So these are there. So we are going to install these using a combination of J clips and hog rings or C rings. So this is the slanted cages, and it is in this application that we would use the hog rings or the C rings. So as you can see, based on what we're clipping or where we're clipping, it would be sort of difficult to use J clips to connect these parts. So hog rings or C rings are a better option. So we had a welder just whip up some new frames, new stands for the cages to rest on. So we're going to paint them before we actually install them. So these new cages will go beside these in the rabbitry. Here we have the finished product. All 3 cages have been assembled, and we just put it up on the stand just to see what it will look like. Now, this is not where it will reside permanently. We're going to put this inside the rabbitry soon, but we're just doing a test fitting, so to speak, just to see. So that's it from us here at JSH Rabbits. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Of course, if you have any other topics that you'd like us to cover, don't forget to just put that in the comment section. So that's it from us here today. See you in the next.